Hi there. Welcome to The PrevenTable, the podcast giving you a seat at the table with conversations about the intersection of alcohol, drugs, and mental health in everyday lives. Take a seat and join us.
Welcome to The PrevenTable. As I'm sure you know, if you're a listener to these podcasts, they are brought to you by Hubbard Radio, who is an amazing sponsor. It allows us to utilize the studio space and are just really great partners. And the person sitting across from me today knows this really well because he's actually been behind the mic and behind the camera on these last couple of episodes because you're interning for us this summer.
Yes, I am.
So welcome to The PrevenTable, Justin Boyle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm honored. First off, because I do sit over there and I set up, one of these 2 camera angles that you see on YouTube. And also, put these nice little covers on the mic.
Right.
So kind of feel like I'm cashing in on all my hard work.
That's right. We're like sort of breaking the fourth wall too, right? Because we're having you come in. So your path to us to Prevent+Ed was kind of awesome.
Yeah.
And
it's a cool story.
It's a really cool story. Do you want to share how did we meet each other?
Yeah, so one of my good friends, like his aunt works for I think the organization is actually like St. Louis Public Radio.
That's correct.
And then they were doing like a special on like cannabis and how it just became legal.
Yep.
And like how you want to talk to kids about it and like education and stuff like that. And I was just like kind of recalling on things that like I've heard from like previous. It might have actually been like Prevent+Ed who came into like my high school and like told us how to actually like.
I think that's right.
Yeah, who like actually told us to kind of like talk about substances and how you're supposed to be educated about it and how that can lead to like you not developing like a substance use disorder. So I just kind of like pulled on that and then talked about it like in my interview. But I thought it would be more of just like. They would have like my clip of audio and then they would like incorporate into like a longer segment and then it would just be like that. But I didn't know that they were going to be playing it before you. So then like when I heard it and I heard that you like, does Justin want a job? Like at the time I actually did need a job. So I was like, I don't know if this is a joke. I don't know if she's serious, but I will.
Be a really terrible joke.
I didn't know. So I was like, I just had to, follow up.
So you followed up and you were persistent, which I appreciate because, I think, by the way, this was like in January.
Yeah, this was.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember being like in the airport, like about to go on a trip in Intercession. And I was like, oh, I got to send this email. Like,
we weren't exactly looking for interns in January for the summer, but you were persistent and you're like, hey, I haven't heard back from you. Do you have any thoughts on this? And I was like, oh, I like this guy. I like him. Yeah. But so I'm sitting there at St. Louis on the radio, and they told me, they were up front and said, we're going to be interviewing some young people for their perspective. And as they began the interview, they introduced the segment by playing, I'm old, who sings the Smoke Weed Every Day?
That's like Mac Dre, I think, and Snoop Dogg.
Okay, it's somebody.
Generation.
Okay,
yeah.
So they play that, and I'm like, boom, 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 and I'm like, this is gonna be bad. This is gonna be bad. The interview itself was great, but they stopped at 2 different times to play. Comments from young people about what they would like to see or how they wish they were educated. And both of your comments were awesome, but the way that you were able to speak to how prevention education is important when done the right way, right? When done early and not saying that, you're a terrible person if you smoked weed or whatever. The way you were able to explain it and articulate it in a way that made sense to me as a person who does this for a living, but also to like the general public. Yeah. And I'm just like, do you want a job? Does he want a job? And Elaine Shaw, the host, was like, I think she's serious. And I was. And I loved that you called me and you followed up.
Yeah.
And at the time, you were a freshman in college.
I think I had just finished my first semester. Because I remember I was home for winter break. I was literally in the parking lot, like at my high school, doing my interview with Maya for the radio. So I was like just in the middle of my first year of college.
Yeah. Well, when I found that out, I was sort of floored because I was floored because I thought that you were older. So I didn't even mean offer you an internship. I meant like offer you a job. Like, do you actually want to go into schools and talk to kids? Because this could be pretty great. So then when you and I met and you shared that, you were a freshman and you were looking for a summer internship, and the way that you laid out what you want to do, why you want to do it was very impressive to me. I went back to 2 of our staff, one in communications and one in finance, and I was like, I think we need to like have a meeting with him. And neither of them knew what to expect.
Yeah.
And when we met you, Elizabeth, who's our director of finance, was like, are you sure he's only like 19? And I was like, yes. And she's like, I was not that put together when I was 19. And I think Max said the same thing, like, whoa. So where does that, whether or not, you know, you stick to your plan that you had in January of your freshman year of college, but I would say, like, where does the drive come from? Because you're a very motivated young person.
I think the drive comes through, one, just being able to kind of, you know, in the last, you know, this kind of breaking the fourth wall, but the last, you know, podcast that we just recorded, we kind of got into like meditation, kind of like foresight and things like that. I've been able to I have like a very active imagination, and I can kind of combine that with just, I guess, like probability to kind of map out how my life might go. And I just, you know, try to use all my resources to make that vision a reality, basically. So it's very like, I don't know, I can see it happening and I know how to make it happen, but it's just about the action and putting the work behind it. So being persistent with an email, you know, making some follow-up calls, that's not really that hard for me to do. So, you know, if I do have like that opportunity, if that door does get open, then, you know, I can make the way for it. Putting in the work is not hard, but all the like divine doors and things that are kind of just random that happen for me, I just kind of accept it and then trying to like weave chaos, or try to weave like a stream from the chaos and make it happen, if that makes sense.
I mean, you and I could not be more different in that way. Like, that is not how my brain works, which is why I'm like in awe of the fact that yours does work that way. Yeah. And you do seem analytical, and that is, I mean, so half of your internship you're working on
with finance
and business analytics.
Yeah, and that's my like perspective major right now, because I'm undeclared business, but you know, you can go into finance, you can go into marketing, you can go into just general management. But I'm thinking, you know, I'm out in San Francisco in the Bay Area. I just think like off probability, if I have a business analytics degree and I throw a rock in the Bay Area, I can probably get the most jobs with my business analytics degree. So I'm thinking like, okay, let me try to get as much experience as I can with this. Let me see if I actually like it before I declare this. So, you know, that's why it was also important that I got this internship this semester, because then I would be able to, you know, go into my second year and see, okay, maybe I don't like analytics, and now I can stay away from it, and I can, you know, save those credit hours on wasting, you know, time in a class that I really don't like. So just being able to have like that real life experience first from this internship, that's something that I'm very grateful for. So yeah, like that's kind of how I, you know, navigate.
And so you have like that background, that analytical background, but you also sort of believe, as you said, in probability, which I guess is mathematical, analytical, but there is a little bit of like some spirituality.
Oh yeah,
there,
definitely.
Right? Like I'm looking at your necklace.
Definitely.
Like so you seem also like a pretty like spiritually grounded person.
Yeah.
Has that always been that way? Does that come from like your mom? I know your mom's a pretty big influence on your life, or is that just...
It's really just like Christianity. I was raised Catholic, so like Christianity overall.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I used to go to St. Teresa and Bridget on Grand, in the city. But that kind of like laid the foundation for me, like my spiritual foundation. Even though like I don't consider myself a Christian now, I consider myself more of a person who's more spiritual, and then just open to like different spiritual beliefs and things like that. And I kind of like craft my own kind of beliefs, because I think of like, you know, it's ultimately your connection to the higher power. So I, you know, just work on honing my relationship with God and how I, you know, pray and have my own rituals and personal things like that. So me being able to be flexible enough to realize that I don't have to be part of a religion to be a spiritual person is what keeps me spiritually grounded, because, you know, it's no wrong way to do it then, because I'm going by my book, I'm going by my teachings that work for me, Justin. So that's how I'm always so spiritually grounded, and it helps me, like what I said, like with the probability and the randomness. Like I can just kind of accept the randomness of the universe, and then I can kind of see like which path it's the most realistic for me to go down. And how can I do this? By using the resources at my disposal. So
I know that it appears to me that one way that you sort of stay grounded is by getting very involved in your community. I know since you've been back this summer, you've really like rolled up your sleeves and tried to get involved, not just in a service way, but also just like in experiencing it. I mean, you seem to be like a person who accumulates experiences.
Yeah, and definitely like accumulates experiences, because like the past 2 years of my life have been like full of experiences. Like it started, I would say we can like start this period like last year around late June. I went on a trip to Kenya. And it was through, I don't know if you know of like AFS.
Yes.
And then like Quest, which is local in St. Louis, they, gave me a scholarship, paid for the whole trip for me to go abroad and, see a whole different country, a different continent. And that like really like started it off like with my new life experiences, because I'm going from West St. Louis to Kenya, and then I came back for like 4 weeks, and then I was in San Francisco for college. So it's just like experiences. So I just, wanted to come back to St. Louis for I think the 8 weeks that I'm here, and just like experience as much of my hometown as I can. Because, when you live here, you can stay in your box. You can, stay like square to like your own region in the city and not really explore too much. But, especially as somebody who wants to travel a lot, who lives in a new city, I kind of want to represent St. Louis as best as I can. Best way to do that, get as many experiences as you can. So that's kind of been like my whole thing for the summer. And then with the community side of it, out there in San Francisco, I'm a part of what we call like the Black Scholars Program. So it's like a highly selective, it's only 10 of us, but it's like a program that kind of takes your career aspirations and combines it with like your aspirations to help the Black community. So it placed us our first year in something called a Marshall Riley Live and Learning community, and it's basically a 30-person residence hall experience where it's all Black kids, and this is like significant because we're like, I think anywhere from like 6 to like 10% of the student population.
You're a tiny percent of the student population. So to live amongst people that look like you, that have similar life experience, that's a big deal.
It's very significant. So like we live
many of whom are away from home, right? This isn't a commuter school where you go. So this would be like people creating a bond
all across the country, and that was like cool for my first year, because I didn't have to like go out and make friends, because I'm in this social, I call it like a social experiment, because we had our sociologist professor running it, who knows like human interaction and knows how to like make sure people have like good conflict mediation skills, make sure like their personality types are matched. Like we did like retreats and like all types of surveys and stuff to make sure that we would like be able to coexist peacefully. So that was like one aspect of the community, but then the other side was community engagement. So our second semester, this is actually like my second internship. So my first internship was with,
of course it is,
a place in it was a place in San Francisco called Tenderloin, and if you know like the Tenderloin district,
Tenderloin district, right?
They have a lot of issues. It is underfunded. It is kind of ignored by San Francisco.
It's basically like a under-resourced, historically ignored.
It's been like deemed as a containment zone for vice, basically, in the city of San Francisco. So we like
high rates of like HIV, violence, substance use, like all of it. Right?
So my organization, they just kind of basically worked with giving people the resources that they need to get a job, get access to healthcare, things like that. And that was, they threw us in the deep end. They were like, you're going to get into the community, you're going to work, and you're going to, really learn San Francisco. So I just kind of took that spirit, and I just wanted to apply it back home. My community engaged learning experiences that I learned. So that's kind of how that all came.
And your mom is in this field, kind of?
Yeah, so my mom, she's a nurse by trade. She
must be so proud of you.
She's very proud. But she's a nurse by trade, but she works for St. Louis University Hospital as a clinical outcomes manager. So she kind of works around like health, and I'm kind of still interested in like healthcare administration
and outcomes, and how do people get, when you and I first had just our sort of first, I'll say interview, but it wasn't really the conversation, you were talking about how you've sort of grown up with this idea that like we need outcomes, but why do certain populations get certain outcomes?
Right.
Well, that probably is because of where resources are put and where, AKA money, and where attention is paid. And you want the positive outcomes, but what are all of the things that go into getting the positive outcomes?
Yeah, and then
how can we keep improving on those?
Yeah, and then that's also been just like exaggerated by the fact that my Black identity has been something that's been like at the forefront of my young adult life. That's probably has something to do with the fact that in 5th grade, that's when the whole Mike Brown Ferguson thing happened.
Oh, wow.
So I was kind of just like accelerated into like, what does it mean to really be Black in this country?
Were you in a school that was predominantly Black or no?
It was almost around like, I would say like 40-40 Black, white, and then like the 10% was just like everybody else.
Okay.
But I was like pretty much represented. I didn't really have like I wasn't like isolated.
Yeah.
But
you were still trying to figure it out in real time as like an 11-year-old boy.
Yeah, like what's going
Meanwhile,
on.
Meanwhile, your pants aren't fitting and you're
growing,
like getting pimples on your face and you're like, what is this? Like,
so like
that's a hard age anyway.
That, and then combining like what my mom does and like wanting to see like positive health outcomes in the community. I can't unsee the fact that there are crazy discrepancies between Black people and all other races when it comes to healthcare. And then just me being a Black person and somebody who is very kind of just like, I guess, dedicated to community service and putting out positive in the world. I see a need that needs to be met. I have like the heart for it, so I'm just like, there is work to be done. So that's kind of why I'm interested.
And who better than you to do it?
Right. So that's kind of why I'm interested in just like helping the community, healthcare in general. And that's another reason why I'm interested in Prevent+Ed and interning here, because I know the work that you guys do is public health work. Helping people with drugs and use disorders, which is a public health issue.
Yep.
And then also another thing, tying it into my Black identity, I know the ramifications and the significance of the war on drugs and what it's done to my community. And if Prevent+Ed had as much national funding as, like the DEA back then, I don't know if we would be in the same spot that we are, because that did a lot of harm to our community. It put a lot of people in bars when they really, needed public health resources. They needed, counseling. They needed the resources to, get help. And they weren't. They were criminalized. They were thrown in jail. They were, fueling the prison industrial complex. So...
Well, and, just to be super clear, 6 years ago, we would not be having this conversation. Like, we know this now, right? And I would be lying, and there would be plenty of people who would call me on my shit if I did not say that, like, we haven't always been the best at recognizing how the systems have been built to keep Black people in particular and other communities of culture behind bars and down. We haven't always known or recognized the role we have played in paying more attention to the heroin epidemic when it impacted white people in the suburbs than, for example, the crack epidemic.
Right.
And it's not to say that we didn't pay attention to the crack epidemic. I think we paid a different type of attention, right? And for me, as a white woman, I have had to do a lot of learning and introspection about the role I have played in like trying to be, without even realizing it, like, how do I show up in predominantly Black schools so where I'm not like a white savior? Because I think that in the past, my first teaching experience, I was brought in as under the DSEG order in Louisiana. So I was one of like 3 white teachers. The rest of the entire school was Black. And it was like 99% free and reduced lunch. Wow. And I think I walked into that with this notion that I was going to save everybody. And that I now know, and I think we as an organization and a lot of other people are starting to realize that does not help. And so how can we sort of step out of the way to the extent that's practicable and elevate people like yourself who can do it, want to do it, want to roll up their sleeves, like are from community,
Right.
How can we step out of the way and simply allow you a bigger microphone?
Yeah.
And I say all of that because I could sit here and be like, yes, we've really, this field, we've incarcerated people, and if PrevenTed, had more money, yes. And 10 years ago, I don't really know what we would have done with that extra money. I don't know that it would have been the things that you would have liked to see. I don't even know that we would have asked you, if I'm being totally honest. And that's learning for us, but there's a lot more that we have to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And like what you're talking about, just like not being a white savior or how do you like elevate people, is something that I learned is with my internship experience, something that we like were hammered across the head with was community engaged learning versus traditional service learning. So it's basically you're going into the community and trying to help with the basis of, one, you want to establish meaningful connections, and you kind of want to redistribute power in those situations.
Yes,
you're not
that's
coming
right.
into
It's
a
all about
situation,
power, isn't it?
You're not coming into a situation wanting to, be a savior or help these people. You're just trying to actually make this meaningful bond that's going to produce long-lasting change. And then you're also with like the critical service learning aspect of it, you're trying to think about like these larger social issues that produce inequity rather than just kind of like putting a patch on something and then walking away and feeling good about it, which is like more like traditional service learning, where you would go out into the community, maybe go to like a soup kitchen or something, you do like your one-time thing. So that's something that like we've been, studying from like a theory perspective as well. So just to hear you like say that and know that like it's not just coming in there and being a savior and putting your Band-Aid on it and walking away and feeling good. It's establishing meaningful connections. It's putting people not even in power, but just like on a platform to speak and educate other people. It's really opening the door and allowing people to have a seat at the table.
So I had an issue that happened yesterday and I can't get it out of my head, and I'm not a person that thinks everything happens for a reason, but I do think there's a reason that we're having this conversation, because I think I owe an apology email. I was asked to be part of this like focus group yesterday, and it was about Black men living with HIV, and how like the work that had been done so far and like what were the next steps like to address this pretty challenging population to reach, right?
Yeah.
And how to celebrate all of these things, but how to also like make sure that they have access to the interventions. And I listened to the presentation and it was all amazing. And then I did what I always do, and I couldn't stop kicking myself yesterday. And now now that we're having this conversation, I'm like, I need to just follow up with an email. They unmuted and they're like, oh, does anybody have any feedback or anything? And I came in hot with all of the suggestions. I was like, oh, have you talked to this person? Right. And like, what if we do this? And like, da-da-da-da-da. And it was like I was having an out-of-body experience, Justin. Like I realized at the time that I needed to stop talking, but like I couldn't stop talking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was one of two white faces on this Zoom call. And I just was like, wow, I bet we could talk to this person, and I bet they would have some access to funding, and and it's not bad. It's also just not how I've been trying to show up in spaces.
Yeah, and I've been listening, like I've been binging the PrevenTable. So like I've been hearing you talk about how like you will always just throw solutions when sometimes
always
sometimes people just don't need that. So
I know.
But it's the effort that you put behind it. It's like the conscious effort that you put forward to not want to do that, to be as much of an asset to communities as possible. So just keep working at that. Yeah.
Thank you.
People give grace. I always preach give grace. Everybody human. We all make mistakes. We don't all know how to perform in these different social environments, so it takes a lot of learning. It's a lot of trial and error. But yeah, like I always say, just give people grace. Yeah.
Well, speaking of, thank you for that, by the way. But this isn't about me, although I made it about me. Zanique and James are diversity consultants. If you're listening, I am giving myself a slap on the wrist myself. Speaking of solutions, talk to me about the Brother Connection.
Okay, yeah, so the Brother Connection, this is something that I inherited from my Black Scholars mentor. So they have like a mentor program where senior will get a freshman and they just kind of mentor them. So my mentor was the president of Brother Connection this past school year. And he kind of just like, this first year, for me, is kind of like the revitalization of it. It existed before, like...
Is it like a fraternity?
It's not.
No.
It's more like it's just like an on-campus student organization.
Okay.
Where, you would like book a room, you'll have like a meeting, like a general meeting where you would talk about... we do our general meetings in a structure where people come together, talk about like what they've been doing, accomplishments. You can get celebrated. You can, plug anything that you want. You can tell people about like a business or different opportunities that are happening in the area. And then, we'll probably do like a more like team building or competitive activity where we can just kind of get people like up and moving, and in community engaging with each other. And then we'll probably do like a reflective activity, probably centered around like your mental health or just basically just like expressing yourself and being able to be seen by like-minded people who have similar experiences as you. Because, college is like a microcosm of just like the whole country. So it's like a lot of different like things that are happening. And sometimes you just need that space to be in community with people who are, safe and just like understand your experiences and understand all the things that you might go through, all the microaggressions, all the, fear that you might get from people on campus from you. It's just like to be able to just relax and be in community amongst brothers, almost be in the barbershop. So my job is just to really make a safe space. Yeah, so my job is really just to make like a safe space for Black men on USF's campus. And, I haven't started that work because I'm going to be the president this semester. Right. But, I'm just thinking like, how can I make this the best space for Black men on USF's campus? Is it common
for a sophomore to be the president? I was going to say
it's not.
No.
It's not. But like I said, I inherited it from my mentor. So it might be a little like, I don't want to say like nepotism or anything like that.
No, I feel like he saw something in you.
Yeah, and then I was actually, qualified, and I have like a e-board. I have a great e-board behind me too. That was all like executive board. So those would be like the people like the director of finance, the secretary and stuff like that, who are all like, yeah, okay, we give you the okay, So
is it really just like a place for fellowship, in other words, like just to kind of just like
to just exist and be in community? And it's something that like a lot of different identities have on campus. Like we have the women equivalent sister connection.
Got it. I was going to ask, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, they have a sister connection. They have a Black Rainbow Party, which is for our queer Black people on campus. They have all types of different things for the Asian community, for the Hispanic and Latino community. So we have like these different, USF is very like dedicated to, like exploring their diversity and also like giving their diversity enough room to like be themselves and not just be like people who are on their campus. I don't know if they do too good of a job as like as a PWI or, no, they're not a PWI. We call them a historically white college because our largest percentage is actually Asian people, but
really
it's not like they don't have like the structural power in the organization to where it would be like a predominantly Asian university, but it still does have like the historically white influence, and where it like it operates like a Jesuit school with a small Black percentage or a small people of color percentage. So like they don't really do too good of a job as like making us feel like, hey, like we're loved and we're accepted and all that. But they do give us, the opportunity to run our own organizations and, really just take things into our own hands and kind of make that stuff for ourselves.
And I feel like if anybody's going to change that culture, it's going to probably be you and your team. That's why I say yet. Like they don't do it yet, but they haven't seen you in power yet.
Yeah. But thank you.
So you're on our podcast. I feel like I should need to be a guest on your podcast. Would that be weird? What is it about? I'm inviting myself on a podcast that I don't even know what it's about. What's it about?
So my podcast is called Truth to Power. Truth spelled TROOF. It is
Truth to Power.
It is a play on, I don't know if you ever heard of like Ebonics, but it's basically like how Black people speak, and
I don't think I should be on this podcast.
So just keep listening though.
Okay.
So
All right.
it's like a play on, you know, like how Black people speak, and kind of like how we would say like a word differently than how it's traditionally said or whatever. But it's just highlighting it. It's not like making fun of it or anything. It's just like, you know, just showing like how we talk. And that title got well, actually it's layers behind it, because I put a lot of thought behind it. So that's the first thing. It's kind of like a play on Ebonics. But then the next thing, it's a combination of words. It's, you know, if you take the T from truth and then put roof, it's the truth through the roof. So it's a lot of truth. It's a lot of it. If you ever see like my art for it, it's like a graph where it's like going up. So truth through the roof.
Yes.
And then it got affirmed for me because on that trip that I went on in January, where I was in the airport, like actually talking to you, I was flying to Louisiana as a part of this intercession trip with my living learning community, where it was a Southern cultural immersion trip. So it was like to immerse us in basically Black Southern culture. And we started in Louisiana, then we went up to Alabama, then we went to Tennessee, and then we went to Mississippi. And we basically hit like a bunch of historically Black like landmarks and like places that were significant in Black history. And we went to the Whitney plantation in Louisiana. So this is like the middle of nowhere, Louisiana. It's a plantation. And I had like a very strong connection there because my family migrated from Louisiana in the 1940s. So if you know Black history, you know about the Great Migration and things like that.
Yes.
That's, you know, it's not too long ago. So I think, you know, just basic deduction, I'm like, okay, my family was definitely probably here during enslavement. So I had like a very strong personal connection. I felt like a very, you know, I was very receptive to my ancestors. I could like hear them. I can like feel like I was being led to like.
I've never had that, but I have talked to people who have had that experience, and it's life changing from my understanding.
It definitely is. It makes you think, like being on a plantation makes you. It's surreal, especially because, you know, slavery didn't end that long ago,
right?
And it's something that, you know, is actively being buried. And the further we get, you know, past like 1865, and, you know, when people try to push the post-racial agenda after Obama and things like that to make it seem like things don't matter, you know, it's kind of hard to be connected to those moments. But actually physically being in that space, I was like open, and I had my ears open, had my eyes open to a lot of things. And to go back to like the title of my podcast, they had like these like paragraph testimonials of enslaved people, and somewhere within there it was a testimony from an enslaved woman who was talking about like her experience on the plantation. And in there, like, it was the word truth, but it was spelled TROOF. And I was like, I feel like that's like confirmation. I was like, that's confirmation for me to keep my podcast title as truth. And I took that, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's definitely the right way to go with it. And that just basically like affirmed it, because, you know, it was random. It's one paragraph of literal thousands on this wall
that you were reading. I get it.
So I was like, okay, yeah, that's definitely, you know, my podcast title. But into like the content of it, so I started my podcast in 2020. So this is like pandemic, everybody bored, everybody at home, and just kind of just like doing stuff. And
right. You weren't making sourdough bread. Yeah. You decided to start a podcast.
Yeah. So I was just basically, you know, high school kid just talking. And like all the episodes that like I put out probably back then were like so rough that like I just took out, not because like they were bad or anything, or I was saying like bad stuff on it, but it was just like poorly edited.
Yeah, I
bad
mean,
audio.
You're
you know,
learning.
It was bad. But like the stuff I have out now, it's pretty much just more about like my experiences. Like I have like a breakdown of like the immersion trip that I went on.
Mm-hmm.
I brought on like one half of like our namesake for our living learning community, the Marshall in it, because he's still around and active in the community in San Francisco. He was the first BSU president at University of San Francisco. So we had like a conversation just talking about like how that came to be and stuff like that. So I pretty much just try to do like a little small like shot into like Black consciousness, but not something to like beat you over the head and just kind of like make you like, man, like this is a heavy topic, you know, just kind of like a small insert from a Black Gen Z male perspective. So that's what I try to do. That's all it is.
It's interesting because I gave a shout out to Zanique and James earlier, and they work with Undue Bias. They're our diversity consultants, and we've worked with them on and off, you know, since like 2018, 2019. And they have worked with us to figure out how we can not only educate, which sometimes can be a little depressing, but also how we can celebrate. So they were the ones that suggested having caucusing exercises for our staff, where like the white folks come together and learn and figure out how to do better and think about how we're, how we have implicit bias and microaggressions and all of those things, learning about that. But then separately, our staff of color come together and they have no homework. They are simply in a space, kind of sounds similar to the brother connection, where the tie that binds them is that they work at Prevent+Ed and they're people of color, but it's really a time for them to celebrate their culture, celebrate their background, and like just to build community. Yeah. And I think that it's that piece that sometimes is forgotten, where yes, there's a time for learning, and yes, there's a time to go through history, but there's also a time to sit back and be like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Or
and
like,
just appreciate.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And then like something like, and this being on this podcast and being able to like shout out my podcast is like an IOU for me to like put out more content, because, I am just a regular person out here. I intern at Prevent+Ed. I go to the gym, I walk my dog, I play video games, and it's time to do it all over again the next day. So like, I need to like carve out some time to, make some more content. I'm trying to actually start moving towards YouTube, because, I love the PrevenTable. I'm a podcast person, but I don't think too many people in my demographic are podcast listeners. So I think I want to.
Podcast watchers?
They are. They're more like watchers, more like I could kind of, clip up the YouTube video, put it on TikTok.
That's why we have YouTube.
Yeah, so I'm trying to move towards that. But yeah, this is like kind of like an IOU telling me to like, you're on here, you just shouted it out. I know I got like 3 weeks before this comes out to like really put out content and make sure that I have something, for people that after they hear this, check out.
That's it.
My whole thing is, what I'm trying to move towards now is like you said, just being able to kind of lightly celebrate and appreciate. Like my whole thing is I'm trying to move towards like what I call casual consciousness, to where people will,
I feel like that's going to be the title of the episode.
Yeah, because that's like the whole thing that I'm trying to build. Like I'm trying to build a brand around it, but I just basically want people to, kind of.
He trademarked it. You can't take that, everybody.
Yes,
okay?
I did.
He trademarked it.
Yes, but I'm trying to like casual consciousness to me would basically mean like, knowing history, knowing how history led us to the point that we're at now, and basically being informed on politics, decisions, local government, things like that. Just aware of your surrounding, basically, but not in the way where it's your whole personality and where you are just like this radical person who is always, against the government and, blaming everybody and stuff like that. But where you can just like in your daily life, be like, okay, I know how this moment in history affected how I got here, and now I understand the situation, and now I'm not out here mad, I'm not frustrated, I'm not feeling, weak and disempowered and stuff like that, but now I feel empowered to be like, hey, I understand this now, and I know how to use the resources around me to, make a change. So that's pretty much all casual consciousness is.
Your analytical background. Like I can see it as your... Like there's a purpose for everything you do, and it seems like the purpose for your podcast and just your whole like embodiment of you is that almost like predictability. Like if you do this, then this will happen. Yeah. And so if I find out some of the background and I think about where it's bringing me today, then I also can think about how it's going to impact me in the future. Like that is...
Yeah.
That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. And, I just wanted to be, and I make it, I want it to be casual, because I want it to be something that like you can do without it being like a thing. Like do it like how you breathe, no it's history just, like how you do anything else. No history like how the NBA, like how your favorite TV show.
I mean, I don't know the NBA.
I'm just speaking out. But, just
how about Mary J? I know.
Mary J.
That's how I knew I liked you the first day.
My Mary J shirt.
Your very first day, you wore a Mary J shirt. Yeah. And I knew I was going to like you then.
Yeah. But
thank you so much for being here. Thank you for working with us this summer and for really like imparting your knowledge. I know our whole team is learning a ton from you. I feel like I've grown a little bit in this episode, just by being able to share with you and you receiving it and helping me. So
Thank you for being receptive, by the way.
I'm appreciative more than you know. Thank you, Justin.
No,
if you like what you heard, please consider rating, reviewing, and subscribing to The PrevenTable. And when this comes out, please make sure that you also rate, review, and subscribe to
Truth to Power. It is anywhere you can find a podcast at.
That's a wrap.
Thanks for joining us at The PrevenTable, brought to you ad-free by Prevent+Ed. Prevent+Ed works to reduce or prevent the harms of alcohol and other drug use through education, intervention, and advocacy. Please visit their website at PreventEd.org. Like what you heard? Rate, review, and subscribe to stay up to date with what we are serving on The PrevenTable.